Welcome back, guys. Welcome to another video of Miko's Corner. Today we're back with History of Russia Part 5, the last one. We're finishing the series. I hope you have a great day. This is the second video of the day. I hope you're gonna watch my Marshall's video. It was an incredible experience. And today we're back with Napoleon, with History of Russia. Sorry, Part 5, the last one. There's another part after this, which is called the Russian Revolution, 1917. We'll look at, and then we're done with this series as well. I mean, we're checking, the check marks are gone, man. We finished Napoleon. We're on our way to finishing the Marshalls. We're about to finish Russia, and then my plan will be going to a series about Genghis Khan and Julius Caesar. There are a few recommendations from people, and if I haven't watched your video that you recommended, it's coming. All right, there's people who recommend a lot, and sometimes I get sidetracked. But if I forget about the recommendation, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try to go look back on everybody's recommendations. But yeah, let's go watch History of Russia Part 5.
In 1881, Russian Emperor Alexander II was assassinated by left-wing terrorists in St. Petersburg.
Yep.
Today, the place where he was fatally wounded is marked by the magnificent Church of the Saviour on Spilled Blood.
No way. Like, it's the
Alexander
most beautiful...
II had been a reformer, hailed as the liberator for freeing Russia's serfs.
Which is, that's my point here, is how fucked up is it that you're the guy that freed everybody, that's a liberal, that is trying to liberalize the country, and you get killed by terrorists who want more?
But his son and successor, Alexander III, believed his father's reforms had unleashed dangerous forces within Russia.
I mean, I don't blame him. I'm sorry I'm pausing, but I have a good opinion on his. I don't blame the guy. You see your father get killed because he liberalized the country, because he gave rights to the people, because he gave people, I abolished serfdom, I'm trying to liberalize the country, and you get killed for it? What are you gonna do? You're gonna go the same path? No, you're gonna be fuck the people. They killed my dad. Go fuck them. And then,
That ultimately led to his death. As emperor, he publicly vowed to reassert autocratic rule, declaring that, in the midst of our great grief, the voice of God orders us to undertake courageously the task of ruling.
Which, by the way, the crown jewels of Russia are one of the most beautiful of all the crown jewels in the world.
With faith in the strength and rightness of autocratic power. The Tsar's secret police, the so-called Okhranka, was ordered to infiltrate Russia's many revolutionary groups. Those found guilty of plotting against the government were hanged or sent into internal exile in Siberia. Alexander III was a pious man who supported the Orthodox Church and the assertion of a strong Russian national identity. Russia's Jews became victims of this policy. They'd already been targeted in murderous race riots known as pogroms, after false rumors were spread that they were responsible for the assassination of the emperor. Now the government expelled 20,000 Jews from Moscow, and many who could began to leave the country. Over the next 40 years, around 2 million Jews would leave Russia, most bound for the USA. Concerned by the growing power of Germany, Russia signed an alliance with France, both sides promising military aid if the other was attacked.
Yep.
Sergei Witte was appointed Russia's new Minister of Finance. His reforms helped to modernize the Russian economy and encourage foreign investment, particularly from its new ally, France. French loans helped Russia to develop its industry and infrastructure. Work began on the Trans-Siberian Railway. Completed in 1916, it remains the world's longest railway line, running 5,772 miles, from Moscow to Vladivostok.
That's a lot.
Alexander III was succeeded by his son, Nicholas II. His coronation was marred by tragedy when 1,400 people were crushed to death at an open-air celebration in Moscow. His coronation was marred by tragedy when 1,400 people were crushed to death at an open-air
I thought I heard 14,000, but still 1,400
celebration in Moscow. China granted Russia the right to build a naval base at Port Arthur.
Yeah.
When China faced a major revolt, known as the Boxer Rebellion, Russia moved troops into Manchuria under the pretext of defending Port Arthur from the rebels. This brought Russia into conflict with Japan, who also had designs over Manchuria and Korea. The Japanese made a surprise attack on Port Arthur, then defeated the Russian army at the giant Battle of Mukden. Russia's Baltic fleet, meanwhile, had sailed halfway around the world to reach the Pacific, where it was immediately annihilated at the Battle of Tsushima.
Jeez.
Russia was left with no option but to sign a humiliating peace, brokered by US President Theodore Roosevelt. Meanwhile, the Tsar faced another crisis much closer to home. In St. Petersburg, a strike by steel workers had escalated, and plans were made for a mass demonstration. Tens of thousands of protesters marched to the Winter Palace to present a petition to the Tsar, asking for better workers' rights and more political freedom. But instead, troops opened fire on the crowds, killing more than 100. Bloody Sunday, as it became known, led to more strikes and unrest across the...
What do you think is gonna happen, man? You're creating martyrs. You're creating martyrs, man. You don't...
the country. The crew of the battleship Potemkin mutinied, killing their officers and taking control of the ship.
What?
To defuse the crisis, Nicholas II reluctantly issued the October Manifesto, drafted under the supervision of Sergei Witte. It promised an elected assembly and new political rights, including freedom of speech, and was welcomed by most moderates. Russia's first constitution was drafted the next year. For the first time, the Tsar would share power with an elected assembly, the State Duma, though the Tsar had the right to veto its legislation and dissolve it at any time. Sergei Witte finally lost the Tsar's confidence and was dismissed. The Tsar's new Prime Minister, Stolypin, introduced land reforms to help the peasants, while dealing severely with Russia's would-be revolutionaries, so much so that the hangman's noose got a new nickname, Stolypin's necktie. But having survived several attempts on his life, Stolypin was shot and killed by an assassin at the Kiev Opera House. Meanwhile, Grigory Rasputin, a Siberian faith healer, had joined the imperial family's inner circle, thanks to his unique ability to ease the suffering of the Tsar's hemophiliac son, Alexei. Despite sporadic acts of terrorism, Russia now had the fastest growing economy in Europe. Agricultural and industrial output were on the rise. Most ordinary Russians remained loyal to the Tsar and his family. Russia's future seemed bright.
Yeah. I might do a series on World War I, by the way.
In 1914, in Sarajevo, a Slav nationalist assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, sparking a European crisis.
How many millions? Listen, if this wasn't a crisis, something else was gonna come up. There was so much tension and diplomatic, just brouhaha, if you will, in the world, in Europe at the time, that anything could have sparked a First World War. But how weird is it that the world was plunged into one of the worst wars in the world by a fucking 17, 18-year-old piece of shit? I don't know. For any Serbians who listen to this, Gavrilo Princip, first of all, this is my train of thought here. I think he's a piece of shit. The guy killed the fucking, and he was actually supported by the Serbian government, so don't come after me here. The guy killed the only person that could have given more rights to other people in Austria-Hungary, because the heir to the throne was Ferdinand, Ferdinand, who was the moderate voice. He was the one who wanted to give more power and more voice to other minorities in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And they killed that guy? Killed the emperor, bitch! And then, what's the most surprising to me is that this guy, Gavrilo Princip, he ended up dying of tuberculosis, I think. I'm not sure, but he died in prison. He wasn't quartered, he wasn't burned alive for killing the heir to the throne and for plunging the whole of Europe in World War. He died in prison, which is mind-boggling to me. Like it's 1914, it's an absolute monarchy, and the guy who killed the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire isn't burned alive or quartered or just executed. The guy he's left to rot in jail, and he ends up dying of tuberculosis.
When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Emperor Nicholas ordered the Russian army to mobilize, to show his support for a fellow Slav nation.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Okay, this fucked everything for Russia. This war. You might say that Alexander II with his he was assassinated, and then the next guy was brutal, but this fucked everything. Russia was on the rise. If it was able to industrialize, liberalize, it would have been a completely different country nowadays. It would have been the second world's power, the biggest country by landmass by far. The biggest industry was gonna grow, everything was gonna go for a better. This war fucked everything up. And Rasputin.
Austria-Hungary's ally, Germany, saw Russian mobilization as a threat and declared war.
Yeah, the Germans were afraid.
The
Germans were afraid that by 1916, Russia would be unstoppable as a power, because it was industrializing so fast. They had so much manpower, and if it was able to industrialize to the point that the Germans were, or the English, it would be unstoppable. And so they had to strike now. And now, of course, everybody knows about the Schlieffen Plan, and
network of alliances came into effect.
Yeah.
And soon, all the major powers were marching to war. World War I had begun. Russia experienced a wave of patriotic fervor. The capital, St. Petersburg, was even renamed Petrograd to sound less German. An early Russian
Petrograd sounds less German than St. Petersburg?
advance into East Prussia ended with...
And I'm sorry I know a lot of Russians listen to me. I'm sorry, but St. Petersburg sounds better than Petrograd, doesn't it? It does sound better.
With heavy defeats at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes. There was greater success against Austria-Hungary, but that too came at a high price. Russian losses forced the army to make a general retreat in 1915.
With the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk.
In 1916, Russia's Brusilov offensive against Austro-Hungarian forces was one of the most successful Allied attacks of the war. But losses were so heavy that the Russian army was unable to launch any more major operations. In Petrograd, Rasputin, whose alleged influence over the Tsar's family was despised by certain Russian aristocrats, was murdered. possibly with the help of British agents. The war put intolerable strains on Russia. At the front, losses were enormous, while in the cities, economic mismanagement led to rising prices and food shortages. In Petrograd, the workers' frustration led to strikes and demonstrations. Troops ordered to disperse the crowds refused and joined the protesters instead. The government had lost control of the capital. On board the imperial train at Pskov, senior politicians and generals told the emperor he must abdicate, or Russia would descend into anarchy and lose the war. Nicholas accepted their advice and renounced the throne in favor of his brother, Grand Duke Michael, who effectively declined the offer. 400 years of Romanov rule were at an end. Russia was now a republic. A provisional government took power, but could not halt Russia's slide into economic and military chaos. Workers, soldiers and peasants elected their own councils, known as Soviets. The Petrograd Soviet was so powerful it was effectively a rival government, especially as discontent with the provisional government continued to grow. The Bolsheviks, under Vladimir Lenin, attracted growing support, with their radical proposals for an immediate end to the war, the redistribution of land, and transfer of power to the Soviets. In October, they launched a coup, masterminded by Leon Trotsky. Bolshevik Red Guards stormed the Winter Palace, where the provisional government met, and arrested its members. Lenin and the Bolsheviks were now in charge.
What's funny is that the Germans actually took Lenin was in Switzerland, and they took Lenin from Switzerland, and they basically transported him back to Russia to start a revolution.
Russia had been thrown upon a bold and dangerous course. Under a Marxist-inspired revolutionary party, it would now seek to create the world's first communist state.
Which fucked everything up.
But first it would have to survive the chaos and slaughter of one of history's bloodiest civil wars.
What happened with the Russians in what's called, when the Russians shifted from an autocratic government to a republic to a communist government, once they went to the communist side, all of the progress and all of the expectations over the next century for the growth of Russia collapsed, because there were a lot of mismanagement under communism. A lot of people died needlessly. Stalin, I don't want to speak that much, I don't know that much on the history, but I know Stalin was a piece of shit. But then the question becomes, that's the funniest thing. If it wasn't Stalin who was at the helm during the Second World War, because the guy was basically, I don't want to say a psychopath, but he was basically uncaring about seeing millions die, right? If it was someone else that was at the helm of the government, someone who was more empathetic, I guess, or less ruthless, would the Soviets or would Russia have lost the Second World War? If it was someone who was more, we're losing millions every day here, I need to sign a peace, or is it, or did Russia need Stalin to survive? Because Stalin said, listen, I'm killing everybody before we capitulate. Basically, I'm putting everybody between me and the Germans. And that's what he did, but he lost 27 million Russians died because of it. So, Anyways, I hope you liked my reaction. If you did, like, subscribe, and all that. share, and I'll see you guys next time. See ya.